welcome everybody, and thank you very, very much for joining. I'm very excited to see everybody here. I know the summer romance theme a lot of people were a little bit hesitant, but I'm glad to see that you put forth the effort and gave it a shot, because that's what this is all about. These narration nights are simply a chance for us to gather together and push our boundaries a little bit, try something we've never tried before, maybe, or even if we're well versed in that genre, maybe to flip it on its head and do something new, try something exciting and sort of reach out a little bit, something that we wouldn't normally do. So I'm very excited to hear what you've all come up with. There will be no critique today. It's all good stuff, all rainbows and sunshine today, okay? So without further ado, let's jump right ahead, and Sathya, you can start us off.
Right. So it's the piece called The One on Tinder for the First Time. And here's how it goes. I think it's about time that I create a Tinder account, right? I mean, I can't become a 26-year-old who hasn't been on Tinder. I refuse to. It's there on my bucket list at the very bottom under the category of useless things I should try before I die, aka 26. I mean, you never know. But what if I end up attracting questionable people? Given my history of attracting all kinds of red flags in real life, I shouldn't be surprised. So I gave it some serious thought for about a full minute. Nah, I'm doing it anyway. Where's the fun in playing it safe when you can play it far and wide? After about 3 minutes of uploading, deleting, replacing pictures, one of mine and one from Pinterest, obviously, I'm in. And lo and behold, I'm a swiping ninja. Who'd have thought? Apparently, when you both swipe right, it's a match and you get to chat with each other. My chat box gets filled up to brim within minutes. Whoa, information overload. Is it how it usually works? I have no idea. About a dozen hi and how are you stare back at me. Dang, nobody told me that replying back down hi to good looking strangers was part of the deal. And I must respond now. Or I can just delete my account and go back to being a hermit. And then there was this text. It's from Aro. He says, "Hey Rhea, both your pictures look damn similar. Me and the dragon girl. Now that's interesting. Yeah, Aro, not to boast, but thanks. Haha, killer looks. Oh no, now I can't say thanks again and have to come up with something to ask. Quick, check his profile. Okay, he's a gym person. That's cool. And a photographer. Wow, he doesn't have any pictures of his exactly, but the ones which are there are awesome. And I'm assuming you took those pictures? Yup, they are fire emoji. Love them. Thank you. So, do you read books? He says, yes. And you? Book dragon here. I'm definitely not a dragon, but maybe an alligator. I like him already. Well, we can work with that, Arav. He says, so you're looking for a long-term partner here? I guess yes. Confident you'll find it here? Definitely not sure about that. And then we went on and off about our routine before he said, can I ask you something? Sure. I don't think I'm looking for long term, but I like talking to you so much. Do you think we can continue? Nah, don't worry about that. I like talking to you as well. If anything, we can become BFFs. And he says without blowing off that day, you look damn confident. Yes, Rhea, you are. Back to earth. That's so sweet of you to say. Hey, now I don't think it's fair that I only get to peek at your picture. Haha, I'll share once we exchange numbers. Tempting, Sunara. He somehow made my day. And the next morning, I opened the app to find his profile disappear from my wall. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we are most definitely allowed to use the emojis. Please, everyone, don't be shy with those. Wonderful, Sathya. Thank you very much. That's something that fortunately I never. All that Tinder thing happened well after I was out of the dating game, and I never had to deal with it. Thank goodness for that. Okay, Anagha. Thank you very much. We'll move on to you.
Okay. So, my story is called A Kiss of Love. Let me start. The sweltering heat has been getting to all of us. The ball of fire on our heads, the drying earth under our feet, gift us with dehydration, heat waves, and heat strokes. But for those in love, like me, it is one step closer to the reality that today's mirage promises. I hold on to life as I count down to the upcoming serenity and joy. Time is the perfect healer of mind and body. So I await the miracle by time. I know soon the soothing rains shall help bring back the fluidity and moisture that we desire. That will be when I will meet the love of my life. The sheer proximity with her will help fulfill my life's existence. I will watch her every day, waking up, going about her routine, then resting her head on the pillow at the end of a tiring day, the next morning to repeat the cycle. I avoid bothering her when she is out and about. I will wait for her when she is at peace. With no flurry, no rush. I will admire her beauty, her beautiful black hair, her adorable smile on her peachy lips, her cuteness, even when she is grumpy, and most of all, her smooth skin. Her cheeks pink like the new buds of roses and soft like clouds in heaven. How I wait to feel the touch. Her scent will pull me closer to her, wanting to caress her just the way she is meant to be. I will give her a peck at first, and she won't even notice it. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to taste her again, maybe her neck this time. I will cover myself in her hair, admiring the silky smoothness and the depths of its blackness. Oh, She will pretend to be irritated, but it is all in play, She will take care of me, nourish me, nurture me, let me love her, and then even talk about me to anyone she can find to talk to. My life is nothing if not with her. I want to be around her forever and after, even if it is just to admire her and pour my passion over her body. At every opportunity that fate favors me. I have been waiting for too long, dreaming about what's to come in the future. Maybe I should wait no longer. Maybe I should go to her now. The evening is set and the golden hour is upon us. There is no more waiting. This is the most romantic moment of a day. There she is on the sofa. I can see her from the window. The light hits her hair perfectly and her eyes shine bright. She's switching on the evening lights too. Perfect. I'm going to get in now and surprise her, shower her with my love. There will be kisses and hugs and a warm welcome drink. I can't wait anymore. I must. Smack of true love. She died at her first step inside because her love switched on the light and flicked another switch. The lady inside the house. Mortine, Macharo ka Yamraj. That's a mosquito repellent.
Next is Chandrika, then Priya, and then Sumanya.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Thank God. Okay. So my story goes, the title of my story is Far From Settled. Her parents had named her Tripti. As a principal of a leading school, she was contented too. Her parents were far from contented, for she refused to settle down. Most Indian parents love the idea of marriage and feel that their responsibility is over only when their adult children settle down in holy matrimony and have a couple of their own. They did put up a valiant fight during her 20s and made noise in her 30s, but it slowly petered out, and now that she was 56, made peace with themselves and their daughter. Yet here she was, stepping into the cool environs of the Flying Squirrel, a must-visit coffee shop, a few minutes to 5 to meet the man she had interacted with online over the last few months. The looming retirement made her all too aware that she might end up lonely. So she had registered on a matrimonial website for mature adults. Catching a reflection, she was happy. She projected cool nonchalance, though her stomach did a churn. She wondered if she should have a rose on her hair or asked him to put one on his lip. How the hell will they be able to recognize one another? These thoughts had barely flitted through her when she felt herself drowning in those dark eyes that caught and held her own. She was the kind who scorned cliches, but today she had a healthy respect for them. She walked towards the man who stood up from the chair. She paused for several seconds as her eyes took in his height, which was much more than she had envisaged from the profile pictures she had spent poring over. She was attracted by his irregular features, and his salt and pepper hair gave him character. She was pleased with his choice of dark navy blue shirt and well-fitted fawn trousers. His hesitant Tripti had her teetering on the verge of losing control, only to fall off when he gave her a long-stemmed white rose. Her mind screamed a warning, yet her heart was tired of the constant rationality and the erect spine of the principal. Arnav waited for his own galloping heart to do a slow canter. He was not prepared for the force of such attraction. He felt completely alienated from the crowd as she had walked towards him. A man whose family accused him of not observing things that were right under his nose happened to notice the way she brushed back the stray strand of her hair, almost heard the rustle of her cotton saree as she walked the interminable distance to reach him. He hoped that his words would not croak like a frog, though he felt his throat imitating one. His longish wait post his acrimonious breakup was right in its own inexplicable way, and he did feel that the aroma of their meeting may linger on, as the coffee shop's tagline claimed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Already we've seen three vastly different takes on the prompt. So this is fantastic. This is great. So next we have Priya, and then Sumanya, and then Taru.
The title of my story is Love Beneath the Mango Rains. I faced the vast wake sea, the slanting sunlight ricocheting off the ripples created by silent undercurrents. It was the time of the year, the famed Kerala mango rains. The sky above, a brilliant sapphire, freckled with auburn tinges and feathery clouds, sent shivers through my body. While the rest of the state waited for the rains to cool the earth and ripen the mangoes, I awaited the reunion with my beloved. This unmanned beach stretch was the only place I could meet Anwar. 5 goddamn summers, 5 summers spent in clandestine meets right here under the auspices of nature while work drew us apart. Anwar was in Qatar while I slogged it away in Vienna. Today, we were to meet after a year-long hiatus. Our connections were limited to phone calls and text messages, their intensity hidden from the world that wore their cynicism like a badge. But today, everything was swept aside as the effervescent warm air rang in the salty hues mixed with the petrichor earthy ones. Though the world now celebrated promiscuity and permissiveness, our romance was still under scanner from the moral police in our small towns. After all, Anwar belonged to the other side of figuratively and literally. The Almighty above didn't differentiate between us, but the households did. I'm from the strict Nam household, owning plantations where Anwar's father and brothers once lived. I still remember our moment last summer inside the lone cave hidden by the overgrown herbage at the end of the secluded beach. Anwar had kissed me. As blasphemous as our worlds would think, I loved it, and it opened an abyss of desire in me I didn't know existed. He had gripped my shoulder-length mane as he plunged into my softness, lifting me to the pinnacles of pleasure I had only known to exist in the mills and bones that I secretly stashed away beneath my mattress back home. The stretched silence of the shore was broken as the sky cleaved into asynchronous parts as lightning struck. It began to drizzle, and I looked up to welcome the fresh drops of moisture on me, and it was then I heard him. I looked ahead, Anwar was running towards me, his 6 feet tall, clumsy gait in the sand, unmarring his excitement as he waved, his usually tidy hair flopping away to oblivion, but enough to spark the shiver beneath my wet clothes. My diaphanous emotions must have been a huge giveaway. He wasted no time in rushing towards me, picked up my petite fame as we turned me around. The world, along with the rain, ceased to witness the meeting of two hopelessly maudlin and romantic souls beneath the nature's subtle transition, as golden saffron as you're melted into the deepening green of dusk. Our bodies followed suit. As I looked into his misty eyes, agony evident in the gleam, he said, "It's tough staying away, Rahul. It's tough." The sunset engulfed us into its dark depths.
Wow. Great, Priya. Great. Thank you. All right, let's move along now to Taru, and then Madhavi, and then Suchitra. Let's see what she's written.
Right. Okay, so the title is The Doctor's Assistant. This is the story of a young couple who met for the first time on their wedding night post a proxy wedding ceremony. Summer was in full bloom. The wedding house was a riot of marigold and bougainvilleas. He was a village grocer. She was a farmer's daughter from another village. The marriage was arranged by the family elders through a common doctor who knew both the families. He was 22, she was 17. They both loved white and pink bougainvilleas. They did not have a happily ever after because life happened. She had to abort a baby within a few months of their marriage. Plague happened. He had to close down the shop because their remote village could not get supplies. Plague was raging. The common doctor invited the young couple to help them in lieu of a small salary. This white doctor and his Indian wife were the only registered caregivers in that entire district. As the plague began to spread to the interiors of the country, they needed more hands. The young couple agreed to be their assistants. The young man accompanied the doctor as he toured from village to village. His young wife supported the doctor's wife as she treated the sick with alternate therapies. The young couple met once a week, sometimes for a day, sometimes for 2 days, and sometimes for just a few hours. Every time they would steal a hug and a few kisses away from the prying eyes of their elders. They chose not to get physical because a wife could not hold babies in her stomach. The next pregnancy could potentially kill her, yet amidst their incomplete physical relationship and deaths all around them, they existed for each other. The outside turmoil could not disturb their inner peace because they had found each other. Every time she got him a pink bougainvillea, he brought her a white one. Life happened again, this time in the form of death. The young man died of the plague. Despite the fear of infection and ignoring all cries of caution, the young woman held her husband's hand till he closed his eyes to this world. 2 days later, she was back to work, dressed in her husband's shirt and trousers. She had shunned her sari to stay close to her husband's memory. She was now the white doctor's new assistant as they toured from village to village. White bougainvillea petals nestled in her shirt pocket, close to her heart. She knew all will be fine. The end.
That's definitely romance, I think. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, Madhavi, you are next, and then we'll move on to Suchitra and Sukhjit.
So I'm going to try something that I haven't yet. So I hope this counts as summer romance. So I have titled it as a summer romance. Here it goes. Tara assumed she had real wings when she soared high, embarking on an adventurous trip to different parts of the world. Mangalore and her people were left behind as she got busy with her quest for excellence in life. The summer of 2024 had a change. Her mother's illness forced her to take a pause and return to her roots. Tara was back to her hometown after 15 years. She was helping her widowed mother to manage the seaside resort her parents had established 3 decades ago. The season was in full bloom, and yet there were very few guests. Tara finished her chores in the kitchen and settled down on the porch, admiring nature's beauty when she saw him. He sat on the ground with his back against a log. He was busy drawing. She felt drawn to his veiny forearms and involuntarily flexing with his muscles as he continued sketching. Tara felt inspired. So, what if she had not touched a paintbrush in years? She still had that flair. Tara hurried to her old room and found some old canvas sheets and a few half-used paint bottles. She grabbed a few paint brushes and a palette. In no time, she had set up her easel on the front porch. The object of her attraction and motivation was still engrossed in sketching. Tara dabbed a few colors on her palette, picked up a brush, dipped it up in green color, and did what she never imagined she would do again. She painted. The lush green surroundings came alive on her canvas, and among the foliage, her inspiration found his place. She painted him as he was, casually seated on the grass, reclined against the log, the drawing book balanced on his knees, his eyes fixed on the drawing sheet in front of him, and his beautiful hands in action. She wondered what kept him so intensely focused. When she glanced in his direction, he was gone. She noticed his drawing book left unattended in the log. Curiosity got the better of her. She hurried towards the book lest he came back to reclaim it before she had her chance to look at his creativity. She picked up the book in anticipation, and what she saw surprised her. She felt as if she was gazing into her own eyes in a mirror and not on paper. It was her spitting image. She wondered how someone could be so good at pencil shading. She had miserably failed in the attempt to paint him. Dismayed, she looked at her easel on the porch. She was shocked to see him standing on the porch, studiously analyzing her painting. Ahem, she approached him. Is this me by chance? He asked. If this is me, she said, holding the sketch, then I should say no. A little girl in pink top and two tiny pigtails came running towards them, squeaking excitedly. Mommy, Daddy, look, I found a snowflake. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right, Sukhjit, and then on deck, our own angles and our own viewpoints. Really good, really good. Thank you. All right, we have Sukhjit, and then Chitra, and then Sarva. Sorry, Sarva. Can't read my own writing.
The story is called From Flight to Fight. Sukhdev Singh lies on the floor of the tarpaulin-covered trolley. He has finished his volunteer duty for the day, and on the way back from the main stage at Singhu border protest, he had his lunch at the Haryana Kisan Union's langar. The food and the heat make him drowsy. The trolley at this time of the afternoon is no less than an oven, but the desert cooler boys installed a few days back makes it bearable. The youngsters in the next trolley have converted theirs into an air-conditioned cabin. They won't mind if he takes a nap there, but after a life lived with and under the elements, he's not sure if he can take on the ACs, even though he's here to take on the mighty establishment. He won't be here if his wife's cries of help had not been answered by the entire village during the dark decade of Punjab. The village had marched to his tube well, where the police and CRPF had him tied and were beating him mercilessly. His legs were stretched apart more than what he thought was humanly possible, and his mouth was stuffed with mud to muffle his shrieks when the villagers arrived. Disappearing or eliminating or encountering him with so many witnesses would have been hard, and so he survived. He has walked with a strange gait since that day. He fled that Punjab and won't be here if he wasn't caught by Jordanians in his donkey flight and deported back. He was fleeing guns that pierced the silence of his land and his home and pierced many young bodies. It was that puny little Balbir Singh, the Pakka certified communist comrade of his village, who first took him to a protest rally at the district headquarters. That time it was for compensation for crop failure due to a hailstorm. In the hot, humid days that followed, he sat with the group at the entrance of the DC's office and shouted slogans. He had doubted the whole thing the first time but sat along Balbir. He only knew one survived the system, the establishment somehow, not challenged it. But then it happened. The DC came out of office with folded hands and announced a relief package. That was the day he stopped running from establishment and its lathis and gun. That was the day he felt his heart beat a different beat for the first time. That was the day his love affair with people's struggle started. Sleep finds him for a short while and he wakes up invigorated. He steps out of the trolley and dares the scorching sun with a yawn and a stretch. As he walks towards the kitchen to find a cup of tea, he looks along the length of the protest site. As far as he can see in both directions, the trolleys and tractors are lined up for miles, facing Delhi, challenging it. The thought adds a spring to his steps.
Oh, again, another angle, fresh viewpoint. Very good, very good. Thank you. All right, Chitra, we'll move on to you.
It's called Late Bloomers. For my best friend, menopause was a sentence, her signal to retreat into a domestic cocoon in preparation for that last and final transformation. But I always imagined it as a release, awaiting it as my signal to finally pull up anchor and float away. As my biological clock started to sputter and run out of steam, something else seemed to come to life inside me. Taut crimson petals, straining to unfurl, preparing to burst forth into something surprising and spectacular. As my 48th year approached, my metamorphosis seemed to go in reverse, peeling layers of obligation and years of regimen away, revitalizing instead of withering me. He was outside. He was waiting outside my cabin when we landed at the Gaul, waiting to tell me he appreciated how difficult this particular landing had been. What with the summer storms and the electric winds. His impassive face, cut like rock at all the right angles, registered mild surprise that I was a woman. But he recovered enough to say that he was a retired Air Force officer himself. This was my last flight, I said, adding somewhat unnecessarily that now I was really ready to see the world. He dimpled and asked if I cared to start by joining him for dinner that evening. The air around us began to crackle almost immediately, and outside, under a painted sky, Paris beckoned with her sparkling eyes and honey-tipped nails. The long journey to our current singlehood, born of habitually choosing work we loved over love which we didn't quite know how to work on, had not prepared us for this storm. But as pilots, we both knew struggling against the wind was futile. It's better to glide with it. We glided. When we finally emerged, 2 days later, from the suite at the Hotel L'Opéra on Rue d'Arbois, the storm seemed to have spent itself. The warm air washed lazily over us, sepia-tinted and heavy with the inviting scent of coffee and croissant. The summer light gleamed and glinted with unexpected silver linings and stray crimson petals. We were two captains, choosing to relinquish control, content for the moment to be passengers. I watched him stretch his legs to their full length as I traced the rim of my demi-tasse. Rita, my oldest friend's words came back to me. Be ready for strange and unfamiliar sensations, she had warned. The cold will make you sweat and warmth will make you shiver. Your heart will race often and without warning. Honestly, it's going to be hard to tell the difference between anxiety and joy. Menopause, she had finished, is all about hormones. Apparently, so is love. And this summer, they both arrived together.
Wow. Very good. Thank you, Chitra. All right, Sarva.
Title?
We're moving on.
She
to
said
you.
yes. I'm going to take her to the beach. As the first rays fall on her face, I want the birds to shy away in shame. He has the most brilliant smile on earth. To think that I will be at the receiving end of it.
My feet are 2 feet above the ground, and I'm not even high. For once, she decided not to be her father's obedient daughter. Shall we go? I kickstart my bike. It runs smoothly, too smoothly. With my sweetheart behind me, I don't want him to. Before I know it, she is out of the trial room donning a red salwar. God is unfair. How can a simple fabric turn into a piece of art on her? Is it the power of her heart? Did the fabric feel it too? I take a huge calming breath to appease my erratic heart. Earlier, if she looked like an angel in white, now she looks like a goddess. For once, she agreed to forget her familial responsibilities. Our next stop is the bustling Tinagar. Couldn't I have chosen a better spot? Why drag her through the sweaty, stinky human sea? Tinagar is like a colony of ants. Everyone is always on the move and in a hurry. But I have my reasons. With a smile, I take her hand. She doesn't resist it. She inches closer to me. I can smell her flowery perfume. Dee, where? She questions even as her eyes examine the various shops and numerous wares. She loves it here. I know it. Gosh, it's been so long since I brought her here. I halt in front of Jimiki Kamal. Why? I can see it in her eyes. I divert mine to her ears. They are bare, quite unlike my darling. I don't blame her. Her situation is such. I'm satisfied when her eyes widen looking at a red number. For once, she agreed without argument to prioritize us. Oh, Malli, Malli, the old flower seller stopped near me. My sweetheart always liked jasmine. I pay for the flowers. Hey, do you have a hanky? Something has fallen in my eyes. She laughs with moist eyes. I hand her my kerchief along with the red rose I bought for her. Red suits my girl. She takes them both and bestows me with a smile, worth 1,000 deaths. For once, she decided not to be just the widow of a loveless man. For once, she was not just the mother of a 14-year-old. For once, she chose herself and our love to be my college sweetheart before turning herself in to the police for murdering an ugly predator under the guise of a well-wisher. I will wait for her return. 5 years with her were enough for the past 15 years. This one beautiful day with her will help me sail through until she returns. But what matters this time is that she said yes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sabra. All right. Let's move on now to Sumax, and then Simran, and then Suman.
So the title of my story is Whisper of a Goodbye. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the beach at Kanyakumari. The heat clung to the air, thick and humid, but the breeze of the Arabian Sea brought a whisper of relief. Laima stood barefoot in the sand, her newly grown hair, much shorter now, fluttered gently in the breeze. Her thoughts were heavy as she stared at the horizon. Next to her, Nganba's fingers itched to reach out, to hold her hand just one more time. Instead, he kept them clenched in his pockets, trying to steady the storm of emotions raging within him. He turned his gaze to Laima, who breathed in the cold, fresh air from across the oceans, the setting sun casting a golden glow on her skin. I never thought this day would come, Laima murmured, her voice soft, almost lost in the sound of the waves. She glanced at Nganba, her eyes searching for him, trying to find something that might tell her this wasn't real. Nganba's heart ached at the vulnerability of in her voice. He reached out, he reached out, hesitating only for a moment before gently tucking a red rose behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, brushing lightly against her skin, a touch so brief yet so charged with emotion that it made his chest tighten. Neither did I, he said, his voice rough with the effort of holding back the sadness, and continued. But life surprises us, doesn't it? Laima leaned into his touch for just a heartbeat, her eyes fluttering close as she shivered the warmth of his hand. When she opened them again, she gave him a sad smile, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Tauzal is a good man, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She turned her gaze back to the sea, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill. He will take care of me. Nganba swallowed hard, his hand dropping back to his side. The bitterness of the words made it hard to speak, but he forced himself to respond. He will, he agreed, his voice low. He will make you happy, Laima. That's all I ever wanted. For a moment, they stood in silence, the space between them filled with everything they could never say. A few meters away, Tauzal stood by a small shack, buying fried fish. He glanced back at them, his expression unreadable, before turning away again, giving them this one last moment. Laima turned to Nganba, her hand reaching out, fingers trembling as they brushed against his. The touch was fleeting, almost as if she were afraid to hold on for too long. I will never forget you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Nganba closed his eyes, savoring the warmth of her fingers against his, committing the feeling to memory. When he opened them, he looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to capture every detail of her face. And I will always remember you, Laima, he whispered back, his voice filled with a love he could no longer express. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm orange glow over the beach. Tauzal approached, the scent of fried fish wafting through the air. Laima stepped back from Nganba, her hand slipping away from him as Tauzal wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Nganba forced himself to smile, though his heart felt like it was breaking. He nodded at Tauzal, who turned the gesture, oblivious to the silent goodbye that had just passed between them. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, a chapter of their lives quietly, poignantly came to an end. Laima looked back at Nganba one last time, her eyes saying what her lips couldn't, and the boy sighed as he reached the familiar torn edge of the page. The last few pages were too worn, some even missing, leaving the story frustratingly unfinished. He closed the paperback book, its cover faded and corners frayed, wondering for the hundredth time what happened next. Every time he read it, he ended up here in the middle of the scene, with the sunset frozen and the final words forever lost. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Sumax. All right. Let's move on to, and yes, Arijit, I got you on the end of the list now. So let's move on to Simran, Suman, and then Vinita.
Phone so. All right. So my story is called Finding Love. She felt the stirrings when it first happened. It was like an intractable itch somewhere deep down within. She felt the force of the awakening as if a dormant volcano had woken to the power of its own existence. She knew then what it meant to be alive and kicking. So, shaking the dirt off her beautiful body, she sashayed upwards with the confidence of one who knows she is destined for greatness. There was no questioning the joyous energy of the life force when it strikes you. As and when it does, one just has to obey as if possessed, hypnotized, and move as does a sunflower transfixed by the gaze of the sun. This is how matter must have felt when willed into existence by God. It was God's plan after all. Hey, look, the rose creeper sprouting again, shouted Jaya to nobody in particular, when she noticed a thick stem pushing its way out of the ground in the clearing under the big oak tree. Her mother, Mrs. Johnson, looked up, pleasantly surprised, and breaking out of the reverie that seemed to cloud her every moment ever since her husband had passed. It is now, she inquired, smiling. Early morning sunlight filtered through the branches of the sturdy oak to warm a tiny patch of earth underneath. That was where the rose creeper, dormant since years, had just come back to life once again. A thick, gnarly, protruding oak root gave it just the protection that this nubile young creeper, such as herself, needed to protect herself from being trampled and crushed under human feet as they trained their eyes upwards, admiring starlit skies in the cold, crisp Himalayan breeze of summertime. The rose creeper just crept closer and closer to the oak until it clung and wedged itself in the rough notches of its weather-beaten bark. It did not want to be separated from the oak for even a moment. In this world dominated by earthlings, the rose was grateful for the protection that the mighty tree offered. Some of its branches surely touched the sky, thought the Cupid-struck rose. It's nearly 100 years old, Mrs. Johnson told her grandchildren. And so it knows the ropes, the rose sighed in delight, joy surging through her roots, stems, thorns, and leaves, and she willed more and more buds into existence. Flowers spouted in all directions, inching their way upwards and wrapping themselves seductively around the trunk of the sturdy oak. Could the oak possibly resist? The rose stems and flowers, anyway, were as light as feathers. Soon, its tough old bark was covered with beautiful red roses that seemed to be audaciously winking at the world, delighted to be alive and in love. The heady fragrance of rose filled the air around. The oak didn't feel so alone or solitary anymore. More so, since humans now sought it out all the time. Joy and laughter abounded in conversations again under the oak rose bough. Thank you.
Wow. Plant sex. Interesting. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on now to Suman, Lakshmi, and then Arijit.
All right, it's titled In Houston. I knew she lived in Houston now. We were scheduled to be in town for 3 months, and so I figured I could work up my courage by then. We were working out of the meeting room of a large oil corporate, previewing documents and then scanning them for the team back home to review. Files were piled on the table every morning for us. We were provided rooms in a chain hotel close to work and were allowed to expense a car together. Each evening, we went out for dinner, and on weekends, we planned trips across Texas. Sometimes, when I was alone in my room, I watched the city traffic on the freeway, aware that she was somewhere out there, aware that for the first time in over 2 decades, Swapna and I were in the same city. The last time this happened was at her wedding. She married the son of a politician, a boy from her caste, settled in the US, all boxes ticked. 2 ex-chief ministers, 1 newspaper magnate, and many film stars attended the wedding. She radiated happiness on stage in a red and white sari. Her husband gifted her a brand new Mercedes. Jealous and out of sheer wickedness, I termed the whole affair crass, and quoting The Great Gatsby, called her joy full of money. She was supposed to be happy with me. I had spent 4 years of school in love with her. The tall girl smart enough to be first in class for 2 straight years, and me, the boy who would be a great filmmaker one day. I imagined our life together, the colleges we would attend while dating, the house we would settle into as I struggled to make it. Later, when I made blockbusters, I would thank her for her support in my speech. I fell hard into this dream and even told some boys about it who took to screaming my name every time Swapna got an award. But school ended and life began, and I had to start working right after. One morning on my way to income tax office, I passed by Swapna waiting at a bus stop. It took me a minute to ask my colleague to stop the bike. By the time I got there, she was gone. But did she see me? A few days later, a friend of hers sent a message through a friend of mine. Swapna wants to meet you, he said, calling me one evening. What do I tell her? I said no, I don't want to meet her. Perhaps that younger me had understood something the me in Houston forgot. That the dreams were dead. I was not making films. I was not telling stories. In that version of my life, Swapna was to be my partner. Now I was a paper scanning accountant, and she didn't belong here in this reality. I knew then that if we couldn't do glorious things together, it was better we lived our ordinary lives separately. So I never called her when I was in Houston.
Lakshmi, you're up, and then Arijit.
Awesome. So my story,
Yeah.
it was just hastily written while in the call. So apologies for if it doesn't sound too, in shape. But okay, the story's title is The Beginning or an End. The day started like any other day, but it wasn't. The boy and the boy woke up in a hotel room of a city far away from home. They hardly had any sleep, each for a different reason actually. They didn't convey the reason to each other. They didn't have to. Because they knew why sleep lay truant and out of reach. They kissed like any other day, but still it wasn't the same. They got breakfast, lunch and dinner. It was like any other day, but still it wasn't. They watched a movie and they ate ramen at a Korean shop, their favorite, just like any other day, but still it wasn't. At midnight, they packed their bags and headed to the airport. They entered the gates. One had to go abroad for his master's. The other had to simply come back to an empty home. One of them said long distance wouldn't work, and the other said, "Babe, don't be skeptical. I'll still love you enough." So readers and friends, tell me now, would this be the beginning or the end? Thank you.
Thank you, Arijit. Very good. All those ambiguous endings we're so fond of talking about. Very good. All right. Before we move on, is there anyone that I've missed? I didn't title it, so we'll just go with an untitled love story. It was a love story that rivaled the epics. Mark Antony, Cleopatra, Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII, or John and Yoko. They paled in comparison. His was a bond that would only be severed in death. Of that, Siddharth was certain. They had met as lovers often do, as victims of circumstance. A sudden cloud burst on a dreary summer night, a boy seeking shelter, a friend's home nearby, warm and welcoming. And in that way, Siddharth found himself at a classmate's party. In a darkened room off the main salon, he found her. He was hesitant, but bolstered by the urgings of those around him, they were introduced. Siddharth, a bright, young business major, and she, a sultry and seductive vixen that could show him a world well beyond his tender experience. They began with caution, like a delicate kiss, a tentative embrace. Yet quickly, the occasional meetings, filled with all the exhilaration and intoxication of an illicit tryst, turned to infatuation. Their impromptu rendezvous became scheduled encounters that slated his burning desire, his longing. His obsession had taken root, and within weeks, Siddharth could no longer bear a moment without her. His friends took notice and issued warnings. She's beneath you. She's toxic. The whole affair is unhealthy. But with eyes hued in shades of love, Siddharth did not see. With ears attuned only to the orgasmic rush of their coupling, he did not hear. His mind was fevered, and he could not reason. She consumed all of his waking thoughts. Her demands on his time and money became taxing. He decided that education could wait. Siddharth gained far more from her attention than he did from the ponderous tasks issued by his professors. Yes, she was costly, but all the most precious things in life were. Sacrifices were happily made. A desperate cry came from his parents upon his expulsion from college. They called him home. He did not go. He could not leave her. Siddharth exhausted his welcome on friends' couches or in their spare rooms, and eventually found himself under a ramshackle roof in the slums. The tin shack served their purposes well enough. There, on the dirt floor in her warm embrace, his lover did not judge. She did not care that he hadn't brushed his teeth, or bathed, or had worn the same clothes for weeks on end. Nor did his lover inquire about the obscene acts he had to perform in public toilets at the local rail station. Acts that secured them the funds to keep her and his obsession satiated. Huddled in the flickering candlelight, in the cold, in the damp, Siddharth was not afraid. Once again, he embraced his paramour and slid the frigid needle into his vein. Her feverish ardor flooded each fiber of his body instantly, transforming him into the man only she could bring to life. Smack, junk, horse, skag, or rose by any other name. To Siddharth, she was China White and would forever be his soulmate. And that, I believe, brings us to the end.